Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us. It looks like all of our 6 attendees are with us right now. My name is Jen Pinarski, and I'm a Communications Officer with the City of Kingston. You are joining us tonight virtually for the Red Avenue Pathway Upgrade Community Update. So a couple of housekeeping tips. I'm going to moderate your session tonight. The session is live streamed and recorded, and on the live stream, there is closed captioning available. For your privacy, participants who are joining us on Zoom, your video, your microphones, and your chat features are going to be turned off. I want to take some time to just review some technology troubleshooting because sometimes technology troubles do creep up. A couple of things that you can do to make your Zoom experience more enjoyable is you can adjust your view options. If you have troubles with Zoom during the session, you can go to Get Involved for meeting resources. If you accidentally get disconnected or your internet connection goes down, you have the option of calling into the meeting. I suggest that you write down this phone number just to have it handy. It is 1-778-907-2071, and the webinar ID is 964-9776-1885. Like I said, you can, pardon me, you can also follow along on YouTube. If you do have technology troubleshooting questions, you can also use the raise hand function, and that will flag myself and our IT support, and we can see how we can assist. There is a Q&A portion to tonight's virtual session, and there's a couple of ways that you can ask questions. You can ask a question in writing by typing in the Q&A area at the bottom of your screen, and your name and your question will be visible to all participants. To ask a question verbally, if you're calling in, press *6, and that will trigger the raise hand function. If you're joining us in Zoom, you can click the raise hand function, and then we will turn on your microphone so that you can ask a question verbally. All questions will be shared in the project reporting back at the end of the engagement period. Going to take some time right now to let you review the guidelines for participation. If you've joined us at other public engagement sessions before, these guidelines may not be new, but if this is your first time joining us, welcome. These guidelines make sure that we all have a respectful time together, and it allows for space for us to discuss and ask questions. I'm going to give everyone about a minute to review the guidelines for participation. At the end of the minute, or if at any time you object or have concerns with any of the guidelines for participation, I'll let you use the raise hand function. Okay, seeing no concerns or objections with the guidelines for participation, at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Neil Unsworth, the Parks Development Manager with Engineering Service. And so at this time, I'm going to ask all of our other panelists who are participating to turn on your cameras.
Thanks, Jen. Can you hear me?
You sound great, Neil. Thank you.
Thanks a million. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for letting us into your homes, your kitchens, your living rooms, your offices, wherever you may be. My name is Neil Unsworth. I'm the Parks Development Manager. I work in the Engineering Services group. Engineering Services does, amongst other things, the design for your parks and the construction for renovations to parks or improvements to parks and pathways. I just wanted to introduce a few people who are on the team on this project. It's It's a smaller project in our portfolio, but it's one that we have a full team of experts involved in to make sure we do it the right way. Shanda Sames is our Parks and Open Space Coordinator. She's right there waving. And Shanda is been with the city a long time, and we've done a lot of smaller park improvement projects together, she and I. Derek Hulada is our communications officer, and he supports the messaging back and forth to the community. And Jen has supported us in that role in the past as well, and she's now supporting us in the digital world of COVID community meetings. I also want to introduce you to our two very good designers from Wentworth Landscapes. It's a landscape architecture wing of the firm. You've probably been seen the trucks driving around. And Tara Galpin has been doing park and small and large scale park improvement projects for us for many, many years. She and I first started working together on Lake Ontario Park, a renovation back in 2012. She's been doing a lot of really big projects, including our very large waterfront pathway project that's occurring hopefully this winter and next year, that runs from Lake Ontario Park to Portsmouth Harbor. So there's an exciting new project coming that Tara is responsible for. Danielle Dibbets also works with Tara at Wentworth. There she's smiling. She's always smiling. And Danielle is kind of the main lead from Wentworth on this project. So she has all the nitty-gritty information. And they also have a couple of other sub-consultants, engineering and ecology sub-consultants who are supporting them behind the scenes. So next slide, please, Jen. There we go. Perfect. Yeah, so I wanted to provide a little background on the project. We have had some questions to date in our summer of COVID consultation on this project. And one of the questions was, where did the idea come from to improve the dirt footpath that runs from Rudd Avenue down to Serpentine Lane? So for anyone who's not familiar with the location, essentially when you come off of Highway 2 into the Eastview subdivision, you go down a road, I believe it's called Park Place, and then it turns on the corner, a very sharp corner, onto Rudd Avenue, which is the main road in Eastview subdivision. If you were to go to the left, there's a small footpath that goes down to an unopened public lane. That's a gravel track down at the bottom of that hill. And this is the location for this particular pathway project. It's been used for many decades by the community. And largely that's what the scope of this project is about, is making it a little bit better, but again, with the intention that it would be predominantly used by the community. So the project idea came about through the Waterfront Master Plan. So the Waterfront Master Plan is a large scale guiding document. And I'm going to spend a couple of slides on it with you. We've only got 6 or 7 slides to go through. So we do have time to walk through some of the background. I think it's helpful to understand that the idea wasn't, for the pathway, wasn't concocted in some office in the city, but actually through a very intensive sort of public facing process. So in 2014, the city started a Waterfront Master Plan, just a guiding study and set of projects that would be developed to improve the waterfront across the entire city. We have over 280 kilometers in the city of waterfront. But before we got started, we wanted to ask the community and the public at large what they wanted us to master plan. And that was what we did in 2014. And basically, we heard back from the community that people wanted access to nature, they wanted to see more trails, and they wanted to get access to the water. And we did that by meeting with hundreds of different stakeholder groups and releasing a lot of sort of calls for interest, including postcard surveys and lots of festival interactions. And that was 2014. We reported back to City Council and said, this is what the public wants us to study. And we got the nod to go ahead in 2015. And we did in-depth community consultation with different areas. Because the city's so big, we had to split it into 6 different study areas. The Eastview subdivision is in the focus area number 6. And I'm going to show you on the next slide, generally the improvements described in that study area. And then in 2016, we finished the waterfront master plan. And thanks, Jen. We finished the waterfront master plan, and we got it approved by City Council. And there's basically 138 projects that are in that master plan to be developed over 30 years. So a really long range plan, and we may not get them all done, although we hope to. We've been starting to implement a number of them. We have at least a dozen of them in our current work plan. We've completed some recently, and your project in the pathway is one of the smaller ones, but it is one of the ones that was approved for earlier implementation in that sort of 30-year window. The 3 main goals of the master plan are to create connections along the waterfront, to improve access, and to make enhancements. Those were sort of the 3 goals. And that came out of almost a year and a half of study. We were from 2014 to early 2016. Next slide, please, Jen. So there was an early consultation on this project the preceding year. There were some letters sent out to some of the neighboring residents to take in some feedback. Due to COVID, we thought that it would be a good idea to sort of restart that consultation. So we posted a big sign at the top of the hill that had this cartoon style drawing on it. It's a concept plan. It is actually spatially accurate, although it looks a bit cartoonish. But it described the main elements that we were considering for the pathway improvement project. And we got lots of feedback from the community. And I'm going to read you the 12 images, the 12 comments that we've summarized. We received many comments. There's a lot of duplication in these, but we just put them kind of together so they made so we don't have to repeat a number of those comments. And I'm going to read them only just in case some people can't read them on their screen. We heard feedback that the footpath, the existing footpath, is regularly used by residents. They go to school, down to the school bus, to the mailboxes, or to visit friends up and down the hill, and for people who want to go for walks out onto Abidon Road or down Highway 2 to Madoma Park or Treasure Island. So there is kind of a connection function to the pathway that was recognized by the feedback we got. People said the pathway improvement is much needed and important. That was some of the feedback we got. We heard that kids ride their bicycles on the existing footpath. We heard that the path connection at the top at Rudd Avenue at the corner has limited visibility. So we thought that was good feedback, and sort of knew that, but we took it more seriously once we got that feedback. The steep slope at the bottom of the hill is currently a challenge to users. We generally heard that from some people that the top half wasn't as bad, but the bottom half was a problem, especially when the weather got a little slippery. We heard the aesthetic of the space is important because it is currently a natural looking space. And we heard that better integration of the pathway into this natural space is preferred. Again, not everyone told us that, but that was a theme that we heard. We heard that there's less change and disruption to the site would be preferred. We heard that naturalization and habitat for wildlife is important to people. Some folks said that they felt the bench was unnecessary. So in the original concept, we showed a bench and some stairs going down an asphalt pathway. And there was some concern expressed over privacy and increased usage by people from outside the neighborhood. And then the last comment theme that we received was that the pathway was a little close to neighboring residents. So maybe I can just briefly summarize that this particular concept plan, well, it's hard to see in this concept. We did explore the actual engineering and elevation and grade changes required to make this plan work. And the staircases that are shown are were shown were about half the height of a staircase in your home. So about a half a floor. So if you've ever been in one of those houses that is like a back split or a side split, it would be about half a flight of stairs. But when we did those, we had to create some retaining walls along the side. They would have been done in natural stone, but they would have been probably 2 or 3 courses of stone high, which affects the grading and sort of the impact on the land in that location. So we took that to heart, that people were concerned that they didn't want things to change a lot and that they didn't want to have sort of large built hard infrastructure. That's sort of a general theme we understood. And so in the next concept plan that we've got proposed, which is the current one, we've removed those stairs. Now you may ask why the stairs were there and why the city can remove them. And I'll get into that in the next slide, if you don't mind, Jen. So I'll get into some of the details on the changes we've made to the plan, but I just wanted to provide you an overview of where in the waterfront master plan the project came from. So focus area 6 is on the St. Lawrence River. It's more or less from RMC and Fort Henry, all through the Army base and all the way to Abbey-Don Road, more or less. And the one thing we learned was that people wanted to create pathway connections linking the existing waterfront neighborhoods. So you can walk from your community quite easily into the Milton subdivision, but you can't really go much beyond that.
Hi everyone, Jen Pinarski here. It appears that Neil's video has frozen.
Except for some trails and private lands.
Neil, hi,
Yeah.
it's Jen. It appears that your video froze for about 15 seconds. Do you mind just sort of backing up to where you started describing focus area 6 along the St. Lawrence? Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Sorry. Yeah, so focus area 6 was largely the result of the study of that area and the feedback we got from participants in that specific focus group session, and the feedback we got from that whole year was that people wanted to be connected from community to community along that sort of St. Lawrence River stretch. So people want to be able to walk around RMC and walk around Fort Henry and walk through the Army base and then connect from neighborhood to neighborhood in a way like you already have the Eastview and Milton subdivisions connecting through Milton Lookout Park. People wanted to see that consistently from more or less the causeway all the way to Abbey-Don Road. Now we know the reality is that will take 30 plus years to develop, and there's a lot of private landholders in there that control the land access. So for example, it's up to the military whether they want the city to develop a pathway through their lands. Same thing with RMC and Fort Henry and a number of private lands in between each of the subdivisions that run along the St. Lawrence River. But some of the lands we do control are the Rudd Avenue to Serpentine Way lane connection. And then the actual projects were put into our annual capital budgeting process, and Serpentine Lane was approved by City Council at that stage. And that's how the project became a live construction, design and construction project, was through our annual city budget process. Next slide, please. Yeah, so based on the feedback we received on your immediate pathway project from Rudd Avenue to Serpentine Lane, the designers have done at least 3 versions of this pathway in order to try and reduce the impact on the landscape. That was sort of the primary goal. So I'm going to just walk through I believe we made 7 sort of fundamental changes to the pathway design since we received feedback from the community, and I wanted to share them with you. So the first thing we did was we're proposing to not change the grade as much. And we're going to, and that will help us retain a lot of the mature trees. And that was a theme that we heard, that where possible, if we can retain as many mature trees as possible, we've reduced the impact significantly. That would be desired. And I won't describe it exactly in this slide, but there is a subsequent slide where I can describe how we're following the grade of the existing land a little more gently and passively than we were in the earlier concept, which had the staircases. The second thing we adjusted was that the path surface is narrower. It's still proposed to be an asphalt path. We did get a lot of questions on asphalt path versus a wood chip path versus a limestone screenings path or a dirt path. And because the slope of the site is fairly significant, and we are obliged to improve accessibility, the asphalt path was determined to be necessary as a standard that the city uses on slopes. Sometimes when we have flatter paths through more natural areas, we can do them in gravel, and they work very well. But when there's a slope, typically it will wash out in those first few years, even if you use special binders and stabilizers. So this path is still proposed to be asphalt. We didn't think a concrete path would be suitable because it is a bit more of a natural environment. Because with the asphalt, we can sort of meander and curve and change the widths of the pathway to make it feel a little bit more natural. So yes, it's a narrower surface. It ranges in widths, but in general, it's about 4 feet wide or 1.2 meters. The corners are a little wider just so people can get around them. The things that we changed were smaller retaining walls. So we were able to, by eliminating the staircase, we didn't have the sort of 3 or 4 feet of land to hold back where at the edge of the staircase. We were able to follow the landscape and still improve the slope significantly at the bottom of the hill, make it much less steep. That only required us to have a small retaining wall in 2 locations about 5 or 6 meters long. And that retaining wall is something you would have about knee height. Jen, can you hear me still?
Yes, I can, Neil.
Yeah, I'm getting notice that my internet is fizzing. So there is a small diagram on the left-hand side in this slide that shows the scale of the retaining wall. It's sort of a natural limestone type retaining wall. Again, 5 or 6 meters long, and we need 2 of them to make this particular design work. So we think that's much less of a built form, and that it fits the landscape a lot better. We have no stairs or bench in this concept. And the reason for that is because the bench didn't get met with rave reviews. There were some folks that thought it was a nice element, but some people thought it was unnecessary. And in order to create a flat spot for a bench, we needed a retaining wall and, again, more built form. So we eliminated the bench, and that gave us some flexibility and helped us pick up some of the grade and get a slightly shallower path at the top of the hill. We've also been able to switch the path backwards and forwards at the top of the hill to make a really nice, gentle upper area for the pathway. The removal of the stairs, it may appear that we have, by removing the stairs, made the pathway steeper, but actually the stair footprint themselves take up some space. So while they do step down, they do also have like a horizontal footprint. So by eliminating the stairs, we were actually able to maintain a similar slope and slightly steeper than the previous concept, but it's still a significant improvement over what we currently have out in the field right now. So we're very pleased with that resulting sort of accessibility upgrade, and just general usability will be improved. Plus, if children on bicycles want to use the space, they won't have to navigate sort of down the side of a little ramp that we were going to build in the staircase. They'll be able to use the pathway just sort of like they do now, just a little bit safer. We've also added a lot of new trees and woody shrubs to the plan. They weren't missing in the original plan. We just hadn't sort of got that far along. So I suspect we would have likely done the same thing, but we heard from community members that that was really important. So habitat, food for birds, understory for smaller sort of animals that need understory. The site doesn't have a lot of understory right now. And of course, if we do have to remove a couple of trees, we're going to be replanting more than what we take out. We're also added a pedestrian gate at the top in the pathway, and that will allow someone to walk through the space, or sort of, if they're on a child on a bicycle, get through the space safely. But it will be difficult for people to sort of blast out into Rudd Avenue. You really will have to slow down and kind of look both ways before you get up into the neighborhood street. And conversely, we think we can wrap the gate with some sort of high-vis reflectiveness, so that if people are taking the corner, they won't be just this sort of abyss of where the hill is, and especially on a dark sort of snowy evening, you'll actually see a little bit of a marker that indicates that there's a trail entrance or pathway entrance. The only other thing we did, which again was not part of the original, we hadn't got that far in the original plan, is that we've undertaken an ecological assessment of the site to make sure that we're not missing any species at risk, or make sure our construction habit is consistent with regulations and good practices. And so far, our feedback has been overwhelmingly supportive of the feasibility of the pathway. There's no concerns from our ecologist at all. So maybe I can just walk through the design really quickly. And from the top left-hand corner of the slide, you see Rudd Avenue. And then to the right-hand side, you would go down the hill to Serpentine Lane. And the pathway currently essentially runs from Rudd Avenue, more or less a straight line down the middle of the space. And we're proposing the top half of the pathway meander back and forth. And we've done that for a couple of reasons. One of the reasons is we're trying to retain at least one of the two large ash trees that are in that upper area. And we believe we can do that. We potentially can retain both, but we think one of them is in very poor condition. But we also want to create a pathway where, when the landscape allows it to be, it can be less steep. So if we're ideally, in the pure engineering sense, it would be great to have a shallow pathway the whole length of the space. But as a user, we all know that you can walk up a steep section of pathway, and then you're greatly relieved when you get to a second section of the pathway that is a little bit less steep. And the upper half of this pathway will be quite modest. And if people have disabilities, or they're just a little tired, they can, they're able to sort of get a bit of a rest on the way to finish the path loop. The bottom half will be less steep than it currently is, significantly, but it will be steeper than our accessibility guidelines would prefer. But again, we have restrictions in our piece of land. It's quite narrow at the bottom. And in addition, we have to consider, or we've chosen to consider, nature in favor of, so we've prioritized that a little bit. So rather than build heavy infrastructure and take out a lot of trees, we're building much more light infrastructure, and the pathway will be a little bit steeper, but again, it'll be significantly improved over what's there now. And that will be part of how we propose this to our accessibility committee members. Next slide, please. Yeah, well, this is I think almost the last slide. So the top of the hill, this view is looking up the hill from about midway, and you can see we've drawn just sort of a very rough sketch of the switchback. The yellow pathway alignment shows sort of us following in the landscape for the upper half of the pathway. And we really will not be changing the elevation of the land at all. It might be a matter of 6, 8, 10 inches in that location in order to get a little bit of a cross section of the pathway to be more level. But it will follow the land really, really naturally in that upper half of the pathway system. And then I'm in the middle picture with my COVID mask on, doing layout between the 3 silver maples that are halfway down the hill. And that for us was a really important part of the pathway system, because those trees are in decent shape. They're not perfect, but they definitely have some life left in them, and we love them. They add a lot of aesthetic value to the space. I think where I'm standing is on a series of very sort of exposed roots of those silver maples, and we had the surveyor actually hit the tops of all those roots so that we know the exact elevation of that critical point. and we do not plan to remove those trees. There's 3 of them there. We're going to go between the 2 on the left, if you will, the more westerly trees. But we've designed the pathway to just skim the top of those roots. The last slide is the hardest part. The last part of the slide is the hardest part of the pathway for a couple of reasons. One, because the actual land that the city owns is not hugging tight to that fence at the very bottom. It's off by about a foot or a foot and a half. So we have to bring and the current pathway crosses onto private lands. So we have to bring the pathway over a little bit. And the slope is really unstable in that corner. In this location, we're proposing to remove the Manitoba maple cluster at the bottom, and there's one small ash past there, and there's a culvert which we would extend, and then we would sort of refill the land with new plant material, another oak tree, some woody shrub material, and actually improve the diversity quite a bit, and probably the aesthetic fairly significantly as well. Next slide, please. So the next steps on the project are that we need to finalize the design. We need to run the final design by the engineer to do a cut and fill sort of study on it. But our landscape architects have been pretty successful at accurately laying out the pathway and the slopes and the alignment. We have some ecological due diligence that we have to do. One of those things is to potentially look at the site in the spring to make sure we haven't missed anything, but we have received a report back and there's basically green flags all ahead on that circumstance, but we still would roll that due diligence into our construction tender document to make sure that the contractor followed good practices of when to disturb the tree, if there's a bird nesting it, that sort of thing. So we might phase our construction accordingly. Then we have to hire a contractor. We had hoped to do that in July or August this year and build the path in October or November. But because we received a lot of community feedback, we wanted to make sure that we were doing what people could live with. And we're glad we've adjusted the design. It's, we think, a little bit more natural and a little more sensitive to the place where it's going to go. It's also a little bit less expensive, which was another concern some people had expressed. And then we would hire the contractor in the winter, and they would do the work in the springtime. And it'd take probably about 2 months to do this project. And I think that's it, Jen. If we can go to the next slide and take some questions, if there are any. Yeah.
Okay, so now is your opportunity to ask questions of the project team. There are a couple of ways to ask questions. You can type them into the Q&A tool at the bottom of your screen. You can also, if you would like to ask a question verbally, if you are joining us in Zoom, use the raise hand function, and then I will turn on your mic. If you have called in, press *6, and that will trigger the raise hand function, and then I will turn on your microphone. And we had 8 people join us tonight in Zoom, and there are 5 people following along on YouTube. So this is a great opportunity to ask questions of the project team. So we have a first question from Laura. Laura's question is, who is doing the ecological assessment?
It's Rob Snitzinger. That's a local ecologist, and he and his daughter run the company.
Okay, our next question is from Joanne. Joanne asks, can you ensure no motorized vehicles can use the path, for example, four-wheelers?
Hi, Joanne, thanks. No, we can't insure it. We can do a lot to try and prevent it. We deal with this regularly. That was one of the other really big pluses of the pedestrian gate at the top of the hill for us, was not just to make sure it was a safe way for pedestrians to get, in and out of the pathway onto Rudd Avenue, but also to stop people from using the pathway for motorized vehicles. But short of fencing the entire space off top and bottom and creating this as like a corral, I think it would be challenging. What we'll do is, I think we put in the infrastructure that's currently proposed, and we can monitor the behavior in the space.
Okay, William, I see that you have your hand raised. I'm going to turn on your mic. So William is going to ask a question verbally of the project team. So William, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself, and you have got the floor.
Oh, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, William.
Yes. How widely will the path be publicized or marked in city documents or plans?
Sorry, I can answer that. I think the current signage that is at the foot of Eastview on Highway 2 that indicates a waterfront route running up Eastview Avenue over time could change. We could move that sign so that it was closer to the access through Serpentine Lane. That being said, Serpentine Lane is a pseudo-public space. It's owned publicly, but it's maintained privately. So for the moment, we could not necessarily create any specific signage that directs people through that space. But again, I can't promise that in the future there won't be community interest to do that or political interest to do that. But right now, there's no sort of formal plan to hang up a big billboard that says this is the best way to walk from Highway 2 up into Eastview subdivision. I think it's going to become word of mouth. We recognize that there were some people parking on Highway 2 and down at the store and walking up the dirt track to get up into the subdivision, then go down into the Esplanade Park. During the heat wave in July this year, everything was very strange because of COVID, and social media went off the charts, and we saw that all over the city. We saw waterfront destinations, promoted by people from within the community, people tweeting, just one teenager's friend just sends out a tweet or Instagram. I guess I'm out of date, but and then all of a sudden you get some interest in the space. But my gut feeling is that if your question is who do we think will be using the space, I believe that it will be predominantly the exact same people who use the space right now.
Thank you for your question, William. So just a reminder, if you would like to ask a question, you can type it into the Q&A tool, or you can do like William did. You can click the raise hand function, and I will turn on your mic so that you can ask the project team some questions. So we have a question from Ava. Her question is, I am wondering how in the winter the pathway will be maintained given that it's asphalt. And so she put in brackets, slippery.
We were prepared for this question. Thanks, Anna. Yeah, so compared to the clay dirt track that is steeper, the asphalt pathway will be significantly less slippery. It will not be maintained in the winter. And the city has to post a sign that says not winter controlled or doesn't receive winter maintenance. So there will be no winter maintenance on it, but our experience is that the slipperiness will be significantly lower for three reasons. One, the actual coefficient of friction on asphalt, especially after it weathers over time, is actually much grippier than clay. Number two, it will be much less steep, both lengthwise and sort of on a crossfall. And number three, it's darker in color and it has a tendency to hold the sun. I mean, it faces kind of northeast, so not a lot of heavy sun will hit it, but sometimes you can get some midday sun that'll warm it up and melt it a little bit. Thanks.
Okay, we have a question from Laura. Her question is, in the last 3 weeks, we have noticed We have still noticed parking problems and increased traffic. Can you speak to that, please? And there were 2 follow-up sort of comments and questions after this. Where are people going to park? And Serpentine was blocked.
Yeah, sorry, just to clarify, is the question where will people park during construction or?
Yeah, Laura, do you mind typing in the Q&A to clarify your parking question? If your question's about people who are coming to walk along the pathway or if it's construction parking you're talking about. While you're clarifying, Neil, I think Laura's asking to have her parking concerns addressed that in the last couple of weeks. Laura, if it's easier, I'm happy to, if you just want to use the raise hand function, and we can open up your mic if you want to clarify your question that way. Laura's follow-up statement was they were parking there to walk along the pathway.
So, yeah, so there's a number of things we can do from a parking perspective. If parking is an issue, we would work with our parking authority and the private residents that maintain the space to resolve any concerns. I'm surprised that there's actually parking for the purpose of using the pathway as a destination. I suspect it may have something to do with congested parking up on Rudd Avenue, and some of the people parking may actually be living on Rudd Avenue and just walking up and down because they can't get the space in front of their houses. There's a lot of construction going on. I don't see the actual parking habits changing at all with the implementation of the plan. But certainly if parking is an issue in that space, there's got to be a root cause to it that we could certainly help people who live in the area who are inconvenienced by that parking look into. But I'm going to make a note of that, and we can look into that with our parking folks. That's the best I can sort of answer that question at this time.
Okay, our session is scheduled. Oh, William, I see your hand is raised. I'm just going to let everyone know that we are scheduled to run until 7 o'clock tonight, so we have plenty of time to take more questions for the project team. William, I'm going to ask you to unmute again.
This isn't William, it's his wife, Ruth. So I hope that's okay.
Hi, Ruth. Thank you for joining us tonight.
What's the estimated cost of this project? Because our road is in terrible shape, especially it's sometimes when you're passing the garbage truck, you can barely get by. So I'm wondering why the city has decided to spend, so I'd like to know what the estimated cost of this is, because maybe improvements to our road would be more serving our residents here.
Yeah, that's another me question. Luckily, I work in the engineering department now, so I can answer that question. I used to work in a different department, but it's $77,000. That's our current estimate for the pathway construction. It'll be greatly dependent upon the marketplace. It's a little under our original budget. We were sort of aiming to keep it under 100,000 as part of the original council approval of the budget, but because we're doing it a little more naturally and a little bit less built infrastructure, it's actually come down a bit. So that's the good news. As far as improvements and investment in your road, those are separate decisions. So I appreciate that, and we heard this very loud and clear in July from the community. One resident in particular was able to sort of articulate it really nicely to us that there were some concerns over some drainage issues, some parking issues, the width of the road, the undersized cross section, the condition of the potholes, general overall city investment into the Eastview, in particular Rudd Avenue section of Eastview, was a concern. And I think we heard, and you can correct me if this is not what we heard, but I think we heard that people were frustrated that the city would invest in what sounds like a fairly significant budget to a pathway project when there are other things the community would have rather spent some money on. So with regards to improvements to Rudd Avenue, it's not on a work plan at this time to improve. There's always condition assessments and discussions that can happen with the Director of Engineering to talk about how that can be prioritized over time, whether it's a rehabilitation or a repair. Same thing with the drainage. And my counterparts in engineering and transportation are aware of the interest in improving Rudd Avenue. But when City Council approves the work plans for the many, many different things, we don't stop building playgrounds because there's a library that needs to be repaired. And we don't stop building shoreline repairs when there is another function that needs to occur in the city. So that I appreciate that there was a bit of an anxiety in the community about seeing investment in Eastview subdivision, and it wasn't necessarily what every resident wanted to see. But I will say that each of these individual projects are done in sort of separate approvals, and that the scale of it making improvements to Rudd Avenue is vastly different than the scale of the pathway improvement project. And I suspect that's part of the reason why it hasn't filtered up over time as a project to be completed. But we've taken your note, and we'll definitely ask the engineering and transportation leads on road improvement and transportation improvement to keep Rudd Avenue on the radar. I know our director is very aware of the issue, and we spent a lot of time since July talking about it. Thanks.
Thank you, Ruth, for your question. Joanne, I see that you have typed 2 comments into the question and answer tool. If you don't mind, I am happy to read them for you. If you could just use your raise hand function to provide consent that you're comfortable with me reading them to the group. Joanne's comments are, I think the main concern for most residents is the introduction of more traffic to an already congested neighborhood. As William mentioned, we don't really need it marketed outside of our neighborhood. Just a comment. Our community really needs so many other improvements. And Joanne has added, our frustration with the project is that we didn't ask for it. We need many other improvements. So Joanne, we understand these aren't questions, but like everything else that's entered into the Q&A tool during the virtual session, your comments will be included in the reporting back on the project.
And Jen, I think it's fair to just respond to Joanne that.
Yeah, thank you, Neil.
Yeah, we heard that loud and clear. It doesn't change the process we go through to develop capital projects and go through the sort of long range planning to make improvements across the city, and nor does it change our annual budgeting that's allowed us to improve this project. But we understand that issue. As far as the actual attraction to people using your community, it's not a private community. It's a public road, and moving along waterfront communities is a public right, and it is one that the Waterfront Master Plan seeks to improve. That being said, I have to be honest with you that we've done a lot of these kinds of connection improvements, and the people who benefit and use them are the people who are using them in their current configuration. It's just an enhancement. So I don't actually see a major significant change to the sort of to the program in your community or the amount of use it'll get. The lion's share of benefit will go to the people who use that pathway already.
Thank you, Joanne. So at this time, I don't see any other questions. I don't see anybody else raising their hands. This is, oh, hi, Laura, I do see your question. I'm going to, just like I did with Joanne's, yes, thank you. You anticipated that I was going to ask you to raise your hand so that providing consent that I could read your comment. Seneca and I agree. This is not something we want for our community and do not feel like we are being heard. To this path, we say no, thank you.
Yeah, so thanks, Laura. We've talked about this at great length since July, and I guess just to explain for maybe some of the other people on the line here, staff have the direction from City Council to build a pathway improvement in this location. It's part of our work plan. It's been approved in a long-range plan, and it's been approved in an annual in one of the annual capital budgets. So we don't have the choice to go back to council and say, we don't think this path should be built. First of all, as staff, we believe this path should be built. It's really a matter of how we should do it that is attractive to the community, and also for people who, so that all people can say they can live with it. So I guess my question would be for people who are still currently on the fence or opposed to the pathway, or they don't know how they feel about it, in comparison to the people who have told us they're very interested in the improvement. Has what we've changed in the design, have we done enough to be able to say that when it's built, that people can live with it, that it's good enough? We've really tried to pare that design down to be the most sensitive we can do, so that the change to the existing pathway is really not going to be significant. It's an enhancement, but it's not. It's a minor one. So I guess the question is, and you don't have to answer. People don't have to answer the question now, but I'd just like people to think about that. Is this the sort of thing? Because we have some time to hear you out after this meeting in subsequent correspondences. Is this has what we've done to the design? Maybe Jen, you can toggle back to that design, and we'll put it up online on the webpage. But has what we've done, have the changes we've made, are they adequate in responding to the community interest? Because as staff, we don't have the choice to just not build the pathway. The direction is for us to do it. So our job is to try and do it in a way that balances all the different sort of demands, whether it's engineering or accessibility or environment or aesthetics or community interest. So we want to just really hear from people if they can live with the proposed design, or if there's anything else we can do to make it even better, or make it more tolerable. Thanks. I think that's probably the best way to put that.
Okay, so it's 6:54. I'll do a last call for questions or comments for the project team. Remember, you can type it into the Q&A, or you can use the raise hand function if you would like to ask a question verbally. Okay, I don't see any other questions from people who have joined us tonight. I see that we've had 9 people join us in on Zoom, a couple of people that joined us later on, and as well, we had 5 people watching the live stream on YouTube. So a couple of housekeeping items before we part ways for the evening. We have an evaluation poll that I'm asking, I'm hoping everybody can take some time to complete. The evaluation poll is not on the project that Neil and the project team brought you an update on tonight. It's on our public engagement processes during COVID-19. So the online sessions like we're doing right now, they're new, and we really value your feedback on your experience using Zoom and the registration process. If you joined us late this evening, you can watch a recording of this session on YouTube. It will be up in the public engagement playlist on YouTube. And you can, the project update for Parks Development, it is on the City of Kingston website. So if you look up Parks Development projects, you will see an update there. And within the next couple of days, Neil's presentation will be in there for you. So thank you again on behalf of the City of Kingston for joining us this evening. I'm going to give everyone a few more minutes to complete our evaluation poll. So thank you, everyone completed the evaluation poll. Your feedback is really appreciated as we improve online public engagement for everyone. On behalf of the City of Kingston, thank you for joining us this evening.